From the initial wave of heavy, ominous music that greets you at its main menu, to the ideas left hanging in its closing lines of dialogue, Soma sets itself apart from traditional horror games. And though in doing so it loses much of what these games supply in terms of fear and fright, it more than makes up for in its contemplative excess. In the wake of the success of frictional games' exploits in previous titles, Soma follows what seems like a well-established formula, familiar to anyone who's played any of Frictional's prior efforts. A first-person, exploration-fueled puzzle game set in an oppressive, fictional environment that's designed to capture the interest of the curious and the disdain of the squeamish. Driving the story forward is the desire to unfold the mystery set at the game's core. Who are you, and how did you come to be where you are? Not to mention the many other questions that these necessarily entail. Cold, dark and isolated, Soma takes advantage of its sci-fi setting to add a diversity to its environment that's certainly welcome. The juxtaposition of atmospheres lends to uncertainty and a more deep-rooted intrigue that's begging to be sated. However, with a slight lack of adrenaline-filled sequences to punctuate this atmosphere, the novelty of the setting can sometimes wear thin, and even become tedious. What action sequences such as this kind you do encounter often end in frustration, losing their initial thrill, something that's exacerbated further by the very premise of the game. Unlike many of its peers, Soma relies far more on its narrative. This often comes at the expense of the gameplay often associated with similar titles. Soma prefers to use its puzzle sequences to pace the unfolding of its tale, rather than have this gameplay at its core. Luckily for Soma, the story the game weaves is truly excellent and worthy of this attention it's given. In terms of the puzzle solving itself, Soma contains a significantly lighter resource-based inventory system than many would be familiar with from Frictional's games such as Amnesia: The Dark Descent. Puzzles are often self-contained, and mostly few and far between in the game's largely linear path. Often the environment itself isn't useful in this regard. With such a busy setting, it's often difficult to discern between what's to be interacted with and what is not. Instead, the puzzles are interspersed between long periods of plain traversal, and are used to explore a particular subject in keeping with the broader themes of the game. This creates an experience that is no longer a puzzle game made interesting by its cruel and demanding environment, but rather a narrative-based exploration of certain motifs made richer by application through its gameplay. Though some puzzles often seem poorly explained and can sometimes end in pure trial and error, in the main, they succeed in eliciting the requisite cognitive response, at their very best, giving you room to breathe and consider the consequences, adding another stitch to the tapestry of the tale. In terms of production quality, Soma lacks little. Great voice performances add a believable depth and complexity to the characters that's crucial to the game's events, something that's enhanced further by the odd touch of humour and levity. For the most part, from aesthetic to the sound design of the occasional ambient noises, the subaquatic world of Pathos 2 is beautifully realised. However, the occasional irritation or stutter from loading times or saving delays can add to a frustration that's already bubbling away under the surface. All things considered, Soma sets out to make its journey far more cerebral than most of its horror contemporaries, and in this regard most certainly delivers. No one can evoke fear quite like Frictional games, and what is available in Soma is more than adrenaline. Far more than visceral fight or flight. It's a genuine existential panic, a more helpless and empty terror that's worthy of your consideration.